So the fact is that we don't really know how life came to be on planet Earth. It's always interesting and fun to talk about the cutting edge of science, and that's the limit of our understanding. Just like the early microbiologists were at the limit of their understanding when they began to realize that diseases were caused by microorganisms. So there's even now there are still plenty of limits scientifically to our understanding. But it's been a lot of fun, and will continue to be fun to see the scientific community explore these ideas. Now, there is evidence of early life. So we said earlier that around 3.5 billion years ago, life certainly was on planet Earth. And the reason we know this is because, amazingly, there are fossils of bacteria. And I'm going to show you some examples of stromatolites and sulfur bacteria and cyanobacteria that support the presence of life 3.5 billion years ago. The other evidence that we can look at for early life is just the geological record. Just like humans are changing the planet now and causing it to warm very rapidly, early bacteria changed the chemical composition of early Earth as well. So we'll talk about both of those ideas. These are some fossils of sulfur bacteria that were discovered just a couple of years ago, 2014, I think, so 5 years ago. And these actually predate the presence of oxygen on Earth, which is really incredible. They're fairly large bacteria, and I don't actually know what we're looking at here, but isn't this a cool 3D? This is from NASA's website, where they're basically showing you the presence of these bacteria. And based on the microns, I believe each of these is a little bacteria embedded in a sample of rock, each of these little specks that they're showing you. Now, we also have known for a long time about a structure called a stromatolite. We have presence of stromatolites on Earth. They're about 3.5 billion years old. And what these are is layers of bacteria that form, and these days we find them in the form of cyanobacteria. And these bacteria don't exist, I mean, they are single cells, but they don't exist as single cells. They exist as structures called biofilms, where they're all sort of attached together. And they form these layers, these biofilms, or these layers of bacteria. And in between the layers, sediment is trapped. And so you get these minerals trapped and forming rock over many millions of years. And so these are some modern day stromatolites you can see in the water. They still form today. And here's a fossilized stromatolite. We can carbon date these and determine how old they are, so we can date them back to 3.5 billion years ago. And we know what this structure is because of modern day stromatolites, that we know that these are formed by bacterial biofilms. So evidence again that bacteria were present on Earth at this time. We also have fossils of cyanobacteria. So this is a 3.5 billion year old fossil found in Western Australia. And I've got some other additional pictures. Here's a cyanobacteria from today, a modern cyanobacteria. And you can see how similar the structure is to some of these fossilized cyanobacteria as well. Now, what about the effect of life on Earth? So we know that life doesn't just live on the Earth, it actually changes the Earth. And you don't need to live in a better time to understand this than current times, where we are so grappling with the problems of climate change as a result of human activity on Earth. But we're not the first organisms to change the environment. The original bacteria on Earth were anaerobic, so they didn't use oxygen for respiration. In order to have energy to do anything, you need to be able to breathe, right? But you need oxygen. But the original bacteria did not need oxygen. And bacteria were present on the Earth for quite a long time, probably 1 billion years, before the first oxygen-producing organisms showed up. And when they began producing oxygen, the oxygen was first absorbed by minerals and other matter. So iron, for example, can be oxidized to form iron oxides. And the Earth was much like a sponge. It absorbed the oxygen. So I should be clear that oxygen was on Earth, but not in the form of O2, the kind of oxygen gas that we breathe. So as these cyanobacteria began producing oxygen, it was first absorbed by minerals. But eventually, the sponge was full. Thinking of the Earth as a sponge that can absorb this atmospheric oxygen, eventually the sponge was full and the oxygen began to increase in concentration in the air. And of course, I said earlier that most of the organisms on Earth were anaerobes, so they were not able to survive in the presence of all this oxygen. Oxygen is a very reactive molecule. It was actually poisonous to most of the early organisms. So we refer to this as the Great Oxygen Catastrophe. Our first cells did not need or couldn't tolerate oxygen. And when the cyanobacteria began evolving and producing oxygen, many of these organisms were killed. Now, some of the organisms adapted, and they began to be able to survive in the presence of oxygen and even use oxygen as a way to extract more energy out of carbon. And that's what we do as humans. We actually require oxygen to get enough energy out of the nutrients that are in our diet. So after the production of oxygen, you had this die-off, this sort of extinction event that occurred, followed by a selection for organisms that not just survived in the presence of oxygen, but benefited from oxygen. And you see the evolution of modern plants and animals that exist on Earth today. All right, so that's a little tour through the early organisms, the evidence that we have that there was life on Earth about 3.5 billion years ago. We talked a little bit about the speculation around how life might have shown up. And next, we're going to talk about a very well-established theory about how life changes on Earth over time.